Pay attention to Adrienne Robert, 23 years old. As she steps out of the Diamond Dolls nightclub after a night of fun, saying goodbye to her roommate before moving into her new home with her boyfriend the next day. She has less than 2 hours to live. Because Thomas Frederick, 31 years old, a predator hiding behind a friendly smile, is right behind her. On this day, Adrienne dreams of moving into her first home with the man she loves. On this day, Frederick is planning something far more sinister. This is the story of a night that changed everything.
There's no response from her. Like, her eyes are open and they're dilated.
Is she breathing?
No, there's nothing.
You can't see her breathing at all?
No, and there's nothing.
Adrienne Robert was preparing for the next chapter. The boxes were already packed. The apartment she'd share with Justin was waiting. Tomorrow was supposed to be moving day, the first day of their life together under one roof.
Their first night at the condo together. I mean, she even had a pretty little thing that she was going to wear for him.
A little detail that showed how much this moment meant to her. Adrienne had no idea that a stranger at a nightclub would decide her fate, that her innocent decision to walk home would seal her doom. On paper, Thomas Frederick was just another regular at Diamond Dolls. 38 years old, he'd been to the club countless times before. The staff knew his face, he knew the routine, but beneath that familiar surface lurked something dark and dangerous. While other patrons came for entertainment and left when the night was over, Frederick was different. He was always watching, always waiting, always looking for an opportunity. What made him truly dangerous wasn't just his intent, but his patience. He knew how to blend in, how to seem harmless, how to wait for the perfect victim. That evening, he arrived at Diamond Dolls around 5:42 in the afternoon. The detail seemed insignificant at first, just another customer getting an early start. But this choice revealed something crucial about Frederick's nature. He wasn't there for a quick visit. He was settling in, preparing for a long night, positioning himself to intercept whoever caught his attention. The surveillance cameras captured him arriving in a taxi, an unusual detail in a town where nearly everyone drove their own vehicle. It was a small clue that would later prove vital, but on that night, it was just another unremarkable moment in what seemed like an ordinary evening. The decision to visit Diamond Dolls wasn't unusual for Adrienne and Jay, who were roommates. They'd been there several times together before.
We've been to Diamond Dolls several times together.
In the past?
Yeah. Just me and Adrienne.
It was their spot, a place they felt comfortable. Since they'd been drinking, they made the responsible choice to leave both their cars at home and call for a ride. They arrived at the club around 10:30 that night, both relaxed and ready to have fun. The parking lot security camera caught them walking in together, looking exactly like two friends about to enjoy a good night out. Neither of them could have imagined how differently this night would end. At that point, the club wasn't busy yet. The early evening crowd was thin. Adrienne and Jay found seats at the stage, settled in with their drinks, and enjoyed the show. Everything felt normal, safe, routine. They look relaxed on the surveillance footage. They look like people about to have fun. They look like it's going to be a good night. But danger was already in the building, watching from somewhere in the shadows. Eventually, a man approached their table, African American, wearing a baseball cap that might have been Boston branded, though Jay couldn't be certain, with a goatee and a skinny build, not particularly tall. He seemed nice enough at first, just another patron looking for company. They'd never seen him before. Didn't know his name, had no connection to him whatsoever. He was simply a stranger who decided to join them, and they were too polite or had let their guard down enough to turn him away. This is where the evening's trajectory shifted. Thomas Frederick had found his target. He sat with them, bought drinks, made conversation, played the role of the friendly stranger. But beneath that casual demeanor, his mind was working differently. While Adrienne and Jay saw a random encounter at a night spot, Frederick saw an opportunity developing. He was patient, careful not to seem too eager, letting the night unfold naturally while he waited for his chance. Around 1 o'clock in the morning, Adrienne made a decision that would seal her fate. She wanted to leave. The responsible part of her brain reminded her about tomorrow, about moving day, about all the work that still needed to be done. She needed to get home, get some sleep, be ready for the big day ahead. It was a perfectly reasonable choice, the kind of decision responsible adults make all the time. But here's where everything went wrong. Jay, her roommate, the person she'd arrived with, decided to stay. He was having fun. The night was still young for him. He wanted to keep drinking, keep watching the show, keep enjoying himself. So when Adrienne said she was leaving, he let her go alone. This decision would haunt him forever. In the world of friendship, there's an unspoken rule. If you go somewhere together, you come home together, especially at 1 o'clock in the morning, especially when alcohol's involved, especially when one of you is a young woman. But that rule was broken, and the consequences were unimaginable. Frederick noticed immediately when Adrienne stood up to leave. Jay would later remember him asking questions.
Whatever. And I do remember him getting up because she was no longer there.
Okay. Did he specifically ask where she went, or where she was going? Or?
I think he did.
The stranger who'd joined them just hours earlier was suddenly very interested in Adrienne's whereabouts. Then, moments after she left, Frederick got up too. The surveillance cameras told the story Jay couldn't see. At exactly 1 o'clock in the morning, Adrienne walked out of Diamond Dolls alone. The footage shows her crossing the parking lot, stepping onto the sidewalk, heading home. She's by herself, vulnerable, unaware. Then, only moments later, another figure appears in the frame. Thomas Frederick running after her. He caught up to her quickly, holding something in his hands. It was her jacket, left behind at the club. The perfect excuse, the perfect cover story. She stopped when he called out to her. They exchanged a few words, and then, instead of saying goodbye and turning back to the club, Frederick began walking with her toward her home. This is the moment where everything accelerates. A witness who lived near Adrienne would later tell police about seeing something strange that night. He saw a young woman in a dress, holding her shoes in her hands, jogging down Wolford Road. Running beside her was an unfamiliar African-American man. Neither of them were dressed for exercise. The witness found it odd, memorable enough to report when police came asking questions. The signs of trauma later found on Adrienne's feet told the rest of the story. At some point during that walk home, she realized she was in danger. She tried to run. She took off her shoes to move faster, to gain any advantage she could. She ran barefoot down the street, desperate to reach safety, to reach her home, to reach anywhere Frederick couldn't follow. But he was faster, he was determined, and he followed her all the way to her door. Now, what happened next was pure evil. Adrienne made it inside her townhouse, but Frederick didn't stop at the threshold. There were no signs of forced entry at the front door, which meant he talked his way inside or pushed his way in before she could lock him out, or found another way to breach her sanctuary. Once inside, the predator's mask dropped completely. The house became a crime scene. The 2-floor condominium that should have been safe, that should have protected her, instead became the location of her final moments. She tried to fight. The evidence showed a violent struggle, a broken toilet seat, evidence of a physical altercation on the bathroom walls. The kind of chaos that happens when someone fights desperately for their life. Investigators found her in a state of disarray, leading them to believe a violation was part of Frederick's plan. They discovered a 10-inch to 12-inch section cut out from the sheet on her bed, a crude attempt by the killer to hide evidence of his DNA. But he was in a hurry, panicking, and he couldn't cover all his tracks. DNA evidence was found on the bed, on the mattress, and on Adrienne. The forensic evidence painted a horrifying picture of her final hour. She was discovered in the bathroom with a single fatal injury to her chest. That's where Frederick had finished what he started, where he'd taken her life with cold calculation. The weapon was a knife from her own kitchen, grabbed by the intruder and used against her in her own home. Jay came home around 2 o'clock in the morning, still alone, still unaware. He'd stayed at the club for another hour after Adrienne left, enjoying himself while his roommate was being attacked just a few blocks away. When he walked through the door, he was completely unprepared for the nightmare waiting inside. The 911 call captured his horror, his voice shaking, barely able to form coherent sentences. "I just came home. My roommate. She's not moving." The dispatcher tried to keep him calm, tried to guide him through emergency CPR, counting compressions, trying to save a life that was already gone. She's got injuries all over her. She's unresponsive. There's no response.
2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Just keep going, okay? The paramedics are coming as fast as they can.
The paramedics came as fast as they could, but it was already too late. By the time professional help arrived, there was nothing left to do except confirm what Jay already knew in his heart. Adrienne Robert, 23 years old, full of life just hours earlier, was deceased. Detective teams swarmed the townhouse as soon as the crime was confirmed. The first thing investigators noticed was the lack of forced entry at the main door, suggesting Adrienne either knew her attacker or he'd convinced her to let him inside. But the broken toilet seat and forensic evidence told a different story than a friendly visit gone wrong. This was violence, struggle, a fight for survival. They found evidence outside the bathroom as well, mapping the path of the attack throughout the house. Every surface became potential evidence. Every item had to be photographed, cataloged, analyzed. One team worked the crime scene while another delivered the devastating news to Adrienne's family. The news hit her loved ones like a physical blow. Adrienne had been the light of their family, the daughter with the infectious smile, the girl who made everyone around her happier just by being present. Her mother would later remember that Adrienne had a smile on her face from the moment she was born, that you just knew she was special. Now she was gone, stolen by a stranger's evil intentions. Justin found out when he drove past his girlfriend's house that morning and saw police cars everywhere. He pulled over, confused and concerned, and walked into the worst moment of his life. Yesterday, they'd been planning their future together. Today, he was learning she'd been taken from him. The boxes were packed, the new apartment was ready. Everything was supposed to start today. Instead, everything had ended. Investigators quickly discovered that Adrienne's orange Jeep was missing. The killer had taken it, using her vehicle to escape the scene. But he hadn't gotten far. A tip came in about the car's location, a parking lot at a shopping center just a few blocks from Adrienne's home. The engine was still running when they found it. The headlights were still on. Frederick had abandoned it in a panic and fled on foot. Security cameras became the investigation's best friend. Detectives requested footage from CarMax, a large car dealership near where the Jeep had been found. Around 3 o'clock in the morning, their cameras captured a silhouette, a black male wearing a baseball hat with long hair and shorts, walking away from the area where Adrienne's car had been parked. But the footage wasn't clear enough for identification. They needed more cameras, more angles, more evidence. A nearby store's security system seemed promising, but unfortunately that footage didn't provide any useful details. The investigation needed another break. That break came from the witness who'd seen Adrienne and an unknown man running down Wolford Road. The description matched: African-American male, not dressed for jogging, following close behind a young woman in a dress who was carrying her shoes. This witness testimony corroborated the physical evidence of trauma on Adrienne's feet and confirmed that she'd tried desperately to escape her attacker. Detectives brought Jay in for formal questioning. He was cooperative, devastated, eager to help however he could. He explained the whole evening in detail: the goodbye party concept, the drinks at home, the decision to visit Diamond Dolls, the Uber ride there because they'd been drinking. They'd arrived at the club around 10:30, he confirmed. They sat at the stage, had some drinks, watched the show. Everything was normal until a stranger joined them. Jay described the man African-American, goatee, baseball cap, possibly with a Boston logo, skinny build, not particularly tall. They didn't know him. They'd never seen him before. He just sat down and started talking, and they let him. The name of the club raised red flags with investigators. Nightlife venues tend to attract all kinds of people, including predators looking for vulnerable targets. The fact that Adrienne and Jay had been drinking, that they were clearly relaxed and having fun, would have made them appear approachable, easy to befriend. Jay's account of the evening's end proved crucial. Adrienne wanted to leave around 1 o'clock, he said. She had to get up early for the move. But he wanted to stay, so she walked home alone. He remembered the stranger asking about where she was going, remembered him getting up shortly after she left, but he didn't think anything of it at the time. Why would he? They were just random people at a club. Investigators verified Jay's timeline with the club staff, who confirmed both he and Adrienne had been there that night. More importantly, Diamond Dolls had extensive security camera coverage. The police now had access to footage that could reveal everything: who Adrienne and Jay had interacted with, who the stranger was, exactly when everyone had left. The parking lot cameras provided a wide-angle view of everyone entering and leaving the club. The footage showed Jay and Adrienne arriving together around 10:30, looking relaxed and happy, exactly how people look when they're planning to have a good time. At that hour, the club wasn't crowded yet, and the camera quality was good enough to identify faces clearly. At 2 o'clock in the morning, right when Jay said he left, the cameras captured him walking out alone, crossing the parking lot calmly, stepping onto the sidewalk, heading home. His story checked out completely, clearing him of any direct suspicion. But the real breakthrough came when investigators reviewed the 1 o'clock footage. At exactly 1 o'clock, Adrienne exited the club alone, just as Jay had described. She walked across the parking lot, alone and vulnerable. Then, moments later, a man burst out of the club behind her. He was running, chasing after her, holding something in his hands. The footage showed him catching up to her, showing her the jacket she'd forgotten, engaging her in conversation. Then, instead of saying goodbye and going back inside, he walked with her. The cameras captured them both heading in the direction of Adrienne's home, side by side. The man in the footage matched Jay's description perfectly. But who was he? The police needed more cameras, more footage, earlier in the evening. If he'd left the club around 1 in the morning, when had he arrived? Detectives went back through hours of footage. Finally, at 5:42 in the afternoon, they found him. The same African-American man, same baseball cap, same build, entering Diamond Dolls. And this time, the camera angle was perfect. They had a clear shot of his face. The breakthrough came with a small detail. The suspect had arrived at the club in a taxi. In a town like Jacksonville, where practically everyone owned a car, this stood out as unusual. Taxis weren't commonly used, which actually worked in the police's favor. There would be records. There would be a phone number. There would be a name. The taxi company provided the passenger information without hesitation. The phone number used to call for the ride was registered to Thomas Frederick. When detectives compared his driver's license photo to the surveillance footage from Diamond Dolls, it was a perfect match. They had their man, but they couldn't arrest him yet. The DNA found at Adrienne's house didn't match anything in the police database, which meant Frederick had no prior record that included DNA evidence. They had circumstantial evidence, they had surveillance footage, but they needed that biological connection to prove he'd been in her home, on her bed, at the scene of the crime. Frederick was placed under 24-hour surveillance. Detectives followed him everywhere, watching, waiting, looking for an opportunity to collect a DNA sample without tipping him off. They couldn't risk approaching him directly. If he sensed the police were closing in, he might flee the state, disappear, escape justice forever. Patience became the name of the game. Days passed. The surveillance team watched Frederick go to work, come home, run errands, live his life while Adrienne's family mourned. Every moment he remained free was agony for the investigators, but they couldn't move until they had ironclad evidence. Finally, their persistence paid off. Frederick discarded a cigarette butt on the ground. It was the moment they'd been waiting for. The cigarette was carefully collected, preserved, rushed to the forensic lab for DNA analysis. Now came another waiting game. Would the lab results match the evidence from Adrienne's house? The fear was palpable. What if Frederick decided to leave town during the time it took to process the DNA? What if he got spooked and ran? What if the lab results were delayed? Every hour felt like an eternity. But the lab worked quickly, understanding the urgency. The results came back much sooner than expected. The DNA from Frederick's cigarette matched the biological evidence found at the crime scene. They had him. Arrest warrants were issued immediately. For the first 40 minutes of questioning, Thomas Frederick remained calm and cooperative. He discussed his friends, his typical activities, his visits to various clubs around town. He seemed like just another ordinary person answering routine questions. The detectives let him talk, building rapport, waiting for the right moment to strike. Then they showed him a photograph of Adrienne Robert. His entire demeanor changed. The calm facade cracked. He admitted knowing her,
She bought me drinks. We danced at the club. Met a friend.
Admitted meeting her at Diamond Dolls, admitted that she'd bought him drinks and they danced together, but he claimed they'd parted ways after leaving the club, that he'd gone to work, that he'd never seen her again. The detectives didn't buy it. They had video evidence showing him walking with her toward her home. They had a witness who'd seen them running together down Wolford Road. They had his DNA all over her bedroom.
That's all I recollect from that night. And it's surprising that you showed me that. It just flashed me doing that.
But you do remember walking her to the corner?
Because when I realized I had a sweater.
Frederick's story kept changing as investigators presented more evidence. First, he claimed they'd gone separate ways. Then he admitted walking her home. Then he said she'd wanted to run, so he ran with her. Each version contradicted the last. When confronted directly with the murder accusation, Frederick attempted one final manipulation.
She threw up. Yes, we did have sex. And after that, that's when all hell broke loose. So basically, we got into an argument. She had a knife in my bathroom. And she swung. Once she swung, I got the defensive right then and there. So basically, the knife did plunge into her.
It was a desperate attempt to frame the incident as self-defense or an accident, to minimize his culpability in the eyes of the law. But the physical evidence contradicted every word. The cut section of bedsheet, the injuries indicative of an attack, the forensic patterns, the broken toilet seat. Everything pointed to a violent attack, not a tragic accident. The detectives had heard enough. They had his confession. Contradictory as it was, they had his DNA. They had surveillance footage tracking his movements. They had witness testimony. The case was solid. Thomas Frederick was officially charged with the murder of Adrian Robert. In January of 2014, Thomas Frederick stood trial for Adrian's murder. The prosecution presented a timeline that painted a chilling picture of premeditation and violence. Frederick had noticed Adrian at the club, targeted her specifically, waited for his opportunity when her friend decided to stay behind. He'd followed her out, used the forgotten jacket as an excuse to get close, then pursued her all the way to her home. The evidence showed he'd forced his way inside, grabbed a knife from her kitchen, used it to break into her bedroom when she locked herself in, violated her, then ended her life in the bathroom to silence her forever. His attempt to hide evidence by cutting the bedsheet showed consciousness of guilt. His theft of her car showed panic and flight. Every action confirmed his guilt. The jury didn't need long to deliberate. Thomas Frederick was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Thomas Frederick was sentenced to life without parole. In Florida, that means he will spend the rest of his life in prison and will never get out.
In Florida, that sentence means exactly what it says. He will die behind bars. He will never walk free again. He will never have the opportunity to harm another innocent person. For Adrian's family, the conviction brought no joy, only the smallest measure of relief. Their daughter, their light, their special girl with the smile that had been present since birth, was still gone. Justice couldn't bring her back. A prison sentence couldn't undo the horror of that night. Her mother kept video recordings of Adrian's voice, treasuring every moment captured on film. The vibrant energy, the infectious laughter, the bright spirit that had made their daughter so special, all preserved in digital memory. "I'm going to miss her until the day I die," her mother said. "I used to tell her all the time, you know, Adrienne, I'm your mom until the day I die." Justin had to face a future that no longer included the woman he loved. The apartment they were supposed to share remained empty. The boxes Adrienne had packed with such care and excitement were unpacked by grieving hands. The special outfit she'd chosen for their first night together would never be worn. Moving day had become the day he learned she was gone. Number 16, the most painful question hung in the air, unspoken but impossible to ignore. What if Jay had walked Adrienne home? What if he'd followed the basic principle of going somewhere together and coming home together? What if he'd recognized the danger of letting a 23-year-old woman walk through Jacksonville alone at 1 o'clock in the morning? The answer is unknowable but haunting. If Jay had left when Adrienne did, would Frederick have followed them both? Would he have tried to attack 2 people instead of 1? Or would he have simply waited for another opportunity, another night, another victim? The guilt Jay must carry is unimaginable. He made a choice that seemed insignificant in the moment, a choice countless people make every night. Stay out a little longer, have another drink, let a friend head home alone. But this time, that choice had consequences that ended a life. Adrienne had only wanted to enjoy one last night out with her friend before starting a new chapter. It could have been just another ordinary evening, a memory they'd both look back on fondly years later. But a dangerous individual was in that club, watching, waiting, choosing his victim, and when she left alone, vulnerable and unprotected, he struck. This case serves as a terrible reminder that evil exists, that predators walk among us wearing friendly masks, that a single decision can change everything. The frightening part is, it could have happened to anyone. Any woman leaving a bar alone, any person who appears vulnerable, any night when circumstances align perfectly for a predator. Adrienne Robert deserved to live. She deserved to move into that apartment with Justin. She deserved to build the future she'd been dreaming about. Instead, she became another name in the endless list of lives stolen by senseless violence, another family destroyed by a stranger's evil intentions, another reminder that we must look out for each other, protect each other, never leave each other behind. Her smile is gone from this world, but her story remains as a warning. Stick together, watch out for your friends, and never underestimate the danger that lurks in ordinary moments. Because sometimes the monster isn't hiding in the shadows. Sometimes he's sitting at your table, wearing a baseball cap, seeming nice enough, waiting for you to let your guard down for just one moment. And one moment is all it takes.